Patreon finally removes the page for It's Going Down, which is an Antifa news site. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I discovered the most delightful thing just today, which I just had to share with you. The supposedly anarchist, but more likely communist, Antifa news site, It's Going Down, has had their Patreon page taken down at long last, and for good reason. I learned about this because Tim Pool casually mentioned in his most recent video that presumably after Lauren Southern had her Patreon taken down and a massive amount of people complained that this was biased and politically motivated, using the fact that Patreon kept up the donation page for Antifa news site It's Going Down as an example of Patreon's hypocrisy, Patreon finally removed their page too. Good. If anybody is unfamiliar with the site, It's Going Down, I want you to go check out the kind of stuff that they publish, because it's fairly crazy. And oddly, it's a .org. Now, largely, it's just a listing page serving the purpose of rallying people for various far leftist protests, which isn't inherently a bad thing, but it definitely gets a bit nefarious. It's not so much that they are constantly telling people to enact violence, which they definitely have done in the past, like they did with this infamous poster that was published on the site in April, long after Antifa had already been beating up innocent people at places like Berkeley, but more so, their rhetoric in the way that they describe the right wing is completely hyperbolic and downright ridiculous. I'm serious, this site is about the worst of far leftist fear-mongering. So if you are curious about why exactly the far left is so foaming at the mouth insane in regards to the supposed fascism in the current political administration, you can look no further than this website. They publish several articles every day with pearl-clutching and militant text like the one that I'll read here for a moment. Trigger warning. The far right's hatred for women runs deep, and they have no qualms about their violent language. Some of that language is displayed below, including graphic language of abuse and oppression. This is a rallying cry. Women, we have everything to lose if the far right gets what they want. White nationalists want to force white women to have their white children. There is a real movement in the United States to take away our right to vote, which they call ending women's suffrage. There is a real movement to make it okay for men to abuse and commit violence against women, and discourage women from living meaningful lives outside the home and family, which they call traditionalism. There is a real movement to make women property and return to a world in which we cannot sign contracts, own property, or keep the income we earn. They are literally calling for white Sharia. This is not fiction. It is real. It is violent, and it is brutal. We must resist them. All we are pushing for is a return to the status of women we had in the early 19th century before Jews and their feminism ruined our civilization, says an article in Daily Stormer, one of the most popular alt-right websites. This should not be controversial. Okay, I'm gonna stop right here because the Daily Stormer, I'm not actually right-wing myself, but I know several right-wing people and watch a number of right-wing channels, and literally nobody I know takes the Daily Stormer seriously at all, to the point where people suspect that the site is entirely satire to begin with. But of course, people who read It's Going Down don't know that. And if It's Going Down tells them over and over, this is real, this is really happening, this is real, well, they'll believe it. They think that the Daily Stormer represents the entirety of the alt-right, and then, of course, according to them, everybody to the right of Lenin is alt-right, probably including myself. I've been accused of it before. So when these people hear that somebody like myself advocates for, say, the gender-specific issues of men and boys, and that I criticize feminism, they look to batshit crazy articles like this to determine what I mean by that. A lot of their other articles are giving people the time and place to meet for in-person gatherings with other followers of Antifa, where they can presumably say whatever they want in regards to potentially strategizing about violent and other immoral methods of confronting their political opponents, which is more than their right. They can obviously meet in private, but let's not kid ourselves about the types of people this site attracts and the types of things they are going to probably talk about in private. Also, the site full-on doxes people, like they brag about right here, in regards to the people who made the satire videos for Boston Antifa, where they were calling for the Antifa movement to be more intersectional. I thought that the videos were really funny, and pretty harmless. They were pretty obviously just poking fun at Antifa a bit. But then It's Going Down released the people's personal information, and according to Jeff Holiday, they had to move from the city they lived in, Eugene, Oregon, presumably due to threats of violence. So yeah, the site is major bad news, but we now have the small victory of having their Patreon taken away, though it was only making them a bit over $1,000 a month anyway, which, considering the massive amount of articles being posted there, we can more than assume Patreon was not paying all of their bills. Because this is obviously a multi-person full-time project. And so now, here's what I think people should do. Knowing that these people have had one of their main official forms of income removed, and for good reason, people should start investigating into how else they might be making money. There's all sorts of rumors about George Soros funding these people, but of course, if you ask people who are sympathetic to Antifa where Antifa gets their money, they'll say that that is untrue. George Soros isn't giving money to them, and that their money comes from punk rock shows or something. But that can't be true because anybody and everybody who has thrown punk rock shows knows that you're lucky if you break even and give a touring band $20 for gas money. No, I suspect now that one of their main income fronts for donations has been taken away, they will keep pumping out over 5 different articles every day on their well-designed website, and it will become more and more clear that this group, which factually really does behave like a domestic terrorist group and has been classified as such in New Jersey, now that this form of income has been cut off, I suspect it will be more and more clear to people that there's money being pumped into Antifa from somewhere higher up than a grassroots organizing crowdfunding mechanism. And if you're good at researching stuff like that, it might be interesting to figure out where the money is really coming from. And of course, you can give money to me because I don't want the people I disagree with politically to be physically harmed, doxxed, threatened, or whatever the hell else these people are doing. I'm a nice guy. Give money to me and people like me. Okay, the end.